Hey everyone, welcome to That's Cakeable. I'm Janine, and this week I'm taking you on a trip with me, and we're off to Mexico. I don't know about you, but everyone in this house loves anything Mexican, whether it be burritos, fajitas, tacos, and of course, nachos. So I made this awesome nacho bowl cake that you can learn to make at home, and it's a lot easier than you think. I hope you enjoy this week's video. So of course, I wanted to make life a little bit easier, so I baked this cake in a stainless steel bowl, split my cake into even levels, simple syrup my cake as I always do, and then I started filling it with a delicious orange buttercream. Now I put a support board in the center of this cake because there's going to be a lot of weight on top. I probably didn't need it, but you know, better safe than sorry. Then I continued filling my cake and stacking my cake as normal. Put the top on, and now for that support, we're doing the supports upside down. So I used 2 bubble tea straws in the top of my cake because we're going to flip it over, and then they will be our supports. I used a very small little baseboard that I put a little bit of chocolate ganache on, orange chocolate ganache, and put that on the base and then flipped it over. A very yellow vanilla cake. So now I'm doing a crumb coat with orange ganache, some on the top. I'm now smoothing my edges. And now I place a piece of baking paper on top, a board on top, and then flip it over. Makes it much easier to ganache it this way around. So now I'm doing a crumb coat of ganache on the rest of the cake. Using a flexi smoother to round out those edges, it makes it a little easier. I put a little bit of a non-slip mat under there because it's not adhered to the board with anything, it stops it slipping around. Now I've come back in with my thicker ganache coat to ice my cake. Doing the same thing using my flexi smoother and making sure that we level off that base. Well, what will be our base? It's the top here, but it will be our base. Level. Woohoo! Okay, now we've got a flipper again. Board on the top, flip it over, and now we're going to start adding our fondant. Okay, now I'm putting a little bit of simple syrup on top because we're about to add some fondant. And then I'm just putting our fondant on top. Now, the color balance isn't perfect, but it's like a pale yellow fondant. I used Americolor Gold to get that color. Smooth that on top, and then I took my X-Acto blade and just went right around the edge, cutting the excess off because we only want a lid at this stage. Okay, now we've got to make our corn chips. So I'm taking that same color gold and rolling it out reasonably thinly, and I've taken this magic tool called tinfoil that I've scrunched up and made into a texturing tool. And I'm texturing that fondant just by pressing it and dabbing it all over the fondant. And I'm just cutting out random triangles and rounding off the tops and sides, and then resting them on crushed tin foil again so that they dry more, not uniform. I took some Americolor dark brown airbrush color, put it on a paintbrush, and just flipped it all over to make the brown spots. We're making jalapenos now, so I've taken some green fondant, rolled it out into a snake, and just cutting it into small sections. And then I took a modeling tool with a pointed tip, it's a rubber modeling tool, and made 3 holes in each of those pieces of green fondant. Sort of pressing the edges to make it a little flatter. Now comes the tricky part. This is ivory fondant that I rolled into the tiniest little balls, and I am painting the inside of those holes with just a little bit of water, and then I'm adding those little tiny balls to be our seeds of our jalapenos. Go ahead and make quite a few of them. Okay, so I've now covered my cake with a terracotta coloured fondant. you know, you've seen me cover it before. It's the same as covering around. And I use my flexi scraper to take all the excess off the base. And now I've just cut like a cross into the top of the cake, which will become our bottom. Cut a circle out to expose that baseboard. I've taken a acrylic ruler and made measurements all around the outside of that bowl. And then I've taken my X-Acto knife and cut along that guide that I've made, and then taken that excess off because we're going to make a little lip. There we go. You're really careful doing this part not to touch that fresh fondant so you don't messy it up. I've got a foam board that I'm putting on the board for the cake, and then putting my cake back on top of that because we need room for the lip to sit, and it's got to sit higher than the cake, so I needed a little bit of elevation. Okay, let's make the lip for the cake. So I've taken the same coloured terracotta fondant and I'm rolling out a thin piece that I've actually measured to make sure that it all stays the same thickness, with some spacers, which are just acrylic rulers. A long strip of fondant, and now I'm using another acrylic ruler to cut out a strip of that colour. A long strip, long enough to go all the way around the circumference of our bowl. I'm rolling it up onto a piece of dowel, make it easier to attach to the cake. Now we're going to attach it. Now I've used shortening. I also used shortening to cover the cake before I covered it with the fondant so that our strip would come off a lot easier. And I'm using shortening also on this part in case I make any mistakes, because yeah, I make mistakes. And then I just roll it around the edge where that void is of our cake and trim it at the end where both ends meet. Take my smoother and smooth it out a little bit. This is the cake board that I've got. It's Mexican tiles, and I wasn't going to attempt to make them out of fondant. Mexican tiles are complicated. Okay, so I placed my board on top with some ganache on the base of the cake, pressed it down and flipped it over. However, if you are making a larger cake or transporting a cake, I suggest you do this. So we've got our main display board that's quite thick, and you drill a hole the same size as the dowel you're using through the center of that board. I've got a second board that's 2 inches smaller, and I hot glue that to the base board. Then I take my dowel and pop that in the pre-drilled hole that is filled with hot glue. Then I place the bowl over the top. Just don't forget in that center board to make sure you've drilled your hole, otherwise that cake ain't going on. Okay, now I'm making the handles for the bowl. So I think this is like aquarium tubing that I'm using. I've used a small piece of aquarium tubing that I pre-measured against the side of the bowl, and I covered that in the terracotta fondant. And now I'm just cutting off the excess. Snipping away, just rolling it between my hands, and then I roll it on my table to make sure that it's all nice and secure. I take a piece of florist wire and pop it through that hole, and I just make the shape, curving it a little bit, makes the shape that I want. Now, I would recommend that you don't put the wires directly into the cake, that you use some beeswax to cover your wires, or that you put some straws in there prior. But this isn't getting eaten. This is solely for the purpose of showing you guys. So I just pop that handle into the side with some needle nose pliers, both on both sides, and then just another small piece of fondant around the edges to trim it off and make it look neat. There we go. Now let's start building this Nacho bowl. I've just taken some royal icing in that same colour. And now you see the purpose for the base colour that we put on the top of the cake is that if there are any gaps between the nachos, you won't see it because it's all the same colour. Do you want to know how many nachos I made? Do you want to know? Do you want to guess? 92. I made 92 nachos. And there they are. let's add some salsa. So to make the salsa, I used an apple and apple and strawberry puree that I put some red licorice cut up and some green jubes cut up. For my cheese, I used a yellow coloured modelling chocolate that I froze for a little while and then just used the cheese grater and grated it on just like cheese. Let's put our jalapenos on. And sour cream, loads of sour cream, is my 4/8/16 Swiss meringue buttercream. You can find the recipe for this on my website at that'scakeable.com. My guacamole is exactly the same recipe, I just coloured it with a bit of Americolour avocado food colouring. And of course I loaded that on too because you gotta have loads of guac and sour cream. So there she is, guys, our fully loaded nacho cake. And I have mixed emotions because one part of my brain looks at it and goes, Mexican. And the other part of my brain looks at it and goes, vanilla and orange cake. It's conflicting, but in the most beautiful way. Okay guys, thank you so much for joining me again this week. Please don't forget to like this video, give it a thumbs up because really likes the thumbs up, so that would really help me. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and hit the notification bell down the bottom so that you don't miss out on any of my future videos, which I upload weekly. And while you're here, why don't you check out some of my other videos and give them thumbs up too, that would be awesome. Alright guys, well, thank you for coming to Mexico with me and I look forward to seeing you next week. Until then, don't forget to go get your cake on.